Well, good morning, everybody. It's 10:02. I think we should probably go ahead and get started. There may be a few more people joining us, a few more beeps you might hear, but in the interest of making the most of everyone's time, we should probably go ahead and get started. And I want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us on our latest installment of SAP on Azure Migration and Modernization webinar. We are very excited that you guys are here with us today. I think we'll go ahead and start with some introductions of the team and the people that will be speaking with you today. I'll go ahead and start. My name is Jeff Kaznika, and I am the Sales and Alliance Director for Microsoft Services for YASH Technologies. And I have two of my teammates with me, Sridhar and Vikram. Do you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourselves real quick?
Sure, thank you. Sure. Thank you, Jeff. And welcome all on my behalf as well. My name is Sridhar Organti, and I have been associated with YASH for more than 15 years now. And in my current role, I am responsible for leading the SAP technical SAP infrastructure services, translates into SAP. If you come with SAP background, I mean, if any of you, the old ABAP technologies, enterprise portals, XI, PI, EP, CPI, BTP, those kind of services on the development side of the world, and SAP infrastructure, which translates to basis related services. I am responsible for leading those services in the US. Once again, glad to be here, welcoming you all. Thank you for joining again. Vikram, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sridhar. Yeah, good morning, good evening, everybody. My name is Vikram Kankam. I've been with YASH for the last 11 plus years, and I have overall 18 plus years of experience. I'm a senior solution architect involved in multiple projects, migration projects from on-prem to cloud. So basically, I have a deep knowledge in cloud too. This is all about me. Back to you, Jeff.
Fantastic. Once again, thanks everybody for joining. What we are going to do is I'm going to start with a brief little commercial to explain kind of who YASH is and why we are so qualified to be able to deliver this webinar and SAP on Azure services. And then I'm going to hand it over to Shri and Vikram, and they're going to be going into the meat of the presentation. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully you can see my screen. And real quickly, just a little overview of YASH. YASH Technologies is a customer-centric, transformational global IT solutions and services partner. We have been in business for over 26 years, and we have over 6,000 very talented employees working for us. We have a proven track record of delivering consulting, technology, and outsourcing services to address our clients' evolving and complex digital transformation challenges. We harness business-centric, innovative frameworks and solutions to help our clients and customers achieve unprecedented performance levels and revenue growth at an optimized cost level. We have been recognized as one of the fastest growing IT service organizations in the world, and we're very proud of that. SAP is at the core of YASH's business. Over the years, YASH has emerged as one of the most trusted business transformation partners for global organizations with SAP-centric landscapes. We're one of the largest SAP service providers with a team of over 3,000, that's 3,000 consultants worldwide. We have industry experience across manufacturing, life sciences, mining, utilities, just to name a few. And we offer in-depth functional and technical domain knowledge across major SAP solution areas. We have 25 well-organized SAP centers of excellence and subject matter experts, like the two people that are on the call with me today, that have a wealth of advisory, strategic consulting, business road mapping experience and capabilities. We are very good at helping organizations with complex SAP landscapes drive transformational innovation and realize significant business value. So that's kind of the SAP side. Now the Microsoft side of the partnership. We are also a very experienced Microsoft partner. We have over 700 Microsoft consultants. We are a gold certified partner in 7 different Microsoft competencies. And as you might guess, and probably part of the reason that you're here, one of the main areas that we stand out from other Microsoft partners is our capabilities and experience around delivering SAP on Azure solutions and migrations. YASH has a significant amount of know-how and expertise to be able to deliver a smooth transition of SAP workloads from your current environment or your current on-premise scenario to the Azure cloud with very limited business disruption. We have gained this experience by delivering a whole bunch of SAP migrations and systems upgrades to Azure for our customers. Many of those engagements have been for very large companies with very complex IT environments. Through that process, YASH has built an array of frameworks and accelerators to augment the seamless adoption of the Azure cloud for SAP workloads. These accelerators, coupled with our proven cloud migration methodology, ensures right sizing, faster deployment, and again, because this is very important, almost zero business disruption for our users. Some of our SAP services include SAP S/4HANA implementations on Azure, SAP workload migrations on any DB to Azure, Suite on HANA migrations, and integrations of Azure to on-prem systems. So we can bring Azure to life within your on-prem systems as well. As a gold partner of SAP and Microsoft, YASH helps enterprises deftly navigate through the challenges associated with this type of a migration. We collaborate with our customers to transform their SAP applications and processes, leveraging Azure's innovative platform. During the process of the migration, we emphasize on enhancing the SAP systems with the latest technology being offered by Azure. As many of you know, that changes all the time. So that's very much a moving target that we are very much on top of. We want to go ahead and put our money where our mouth is. And so to prove our expertise and to thank you for spending a little time with us this morning or afternoon or evening, depending wherever you are, we would like to offer your organization a free SAP on Azure workshop. So at the end of this, if you are interested, please reach out to me or put information in the chat window, and I'd be happy to share that and get into the details of it with you. But just kind of at a high level, some of the value that you might receive from attending one of these workshops would be we would help you to identify your specific pain points, which can be solved or reduced by migrating to Azure from your current environment. We will offer detailed information on best practices for migrations in the context of your specific infrastructure environment. We will offer a cost optimization analysis to keep Azure costs at an optimal level and make sure you're not overspending on that and it's working best for your organization. We will offer a disaster recovery and business continuity plan leveraging Azure services. We will offer examples of roadmaps and best practices based on our experience migrating other customers. We will offer additional information on how you can extend Azure services for other customer-specific use cases and business needs. So give you a little bit of an education on what Azure can really do if you're not familiar with it, because there's a lot there. We will help you create initial steps to create a business case to help to sell this idea to leadership within your organization, help create that business case and recognize that value. And we will identify specific customer incentives, which is something we'll talk about a little bit more later, for the Azure migration that are available to help bring that overall migration cost down. So that's kind of a real quick synopsis of YASH and who we are and what we do. We are going to now get into the meat of it. Just first, a quick recap of the various what's happened in the last couple of scenarios, because we are continuing to offer webinars and educational series like this to our customers. At webinar 1, we went through agility and automation to deliver a better customer experience leveraging Azure. We talked about cloud automation, scale, and OpEx flexibility to provide cost efficiency. We offered real-time and predictive analysis from unified SAP and non-SAP data to help get you more value and recognize more out of your data. And we provided innovation with an integrated cloud platform. That was in our first webinar. The second webinar that we did back in February, we just demystified SAP on Azure, and we migrated SAP workflows. We talked about how to migrate SAP workloads successfully to Azure and what really sets Azure apart as a cloud platform for SAP workloads. And then we talked a lot about SAP and Azure capabilities and their experience. And with that said, we're going to jump into our third webinar and the educational part of it. And I'm going to turn it over to Sridhar and to talk about the next slide. So Sridhar, over to you. You are on mute, sir.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for setting the stage. So this is also a recap slide I'm going to start with. As part of our webinar number 1 and webinar number 2, where we kind of touched upon in the webinar number 1, where we partnered with Microsoft as well. Microsoft also joined alongside YASH and actually explained why Microsoft platform is better for SAP workloads. While that was discussed at length during the webinar 1, in the webinar 2, we touched upon our differentiators. I mean, rather, how SAP workloads can be migrated to Azure and why Azure is the right platform for migrating workloads to, and why is that the right platform. And as part of that, we also touched upon one of our proprietary frameworks called YASH Ascent. As you all know, Ascent is climbing, and I mean, we all climb up. And for all practical purposes, I mean, we are actually trying to make our systems climb into the cloud platforms here. And the YASH Ascent framework is actually the framework that we have coined based on various experiences that we have had in terms of migrating various customer systems to Azure as an example, AWS and GCP as an example. While we are actually focusing more on Azure in this context today, how YASH Ascent actually helped and what YASH Ascent all about was discussed at length during the previous webinar. But this is a quick recap. I'm not really getting into the details, but we request you to go through the webinar number 1 and webinar number 2 recording links that would be shared with you all at the maybe in the upcoming days by the YASH team, and you can actually find more details out there. Now, coming back to the recap portion of what YASH Ascent is all about. It's a framework. It's a accelerated framework that we came up with. Having seen multiple customers related systems migrated or into the cloud environments, I mean, we have noticed and then we have actually garnered quite a lot of experiences. We have noticed some of the issues. We learned quite a lot of lessons. With all of these combined, and we have also found ways in which we can templatize some activities. We found ways in which we can automate various activities, be it in the initial discovery stages of the customer's landscape. I mean, we all need to assess customers' landscapes because no one customer's landscape is similar and no one customer's requirements are necessarily the same in comparison to a different customer. So in that context, I mean, there is an assess phase where we actually understand the customer's landscape during our discovery phase, and then we learn about, I mean, some of their SAP landscapes and the integral peripheral components and things like that, and what it would look like if at all that entire SAP landscape is actually migrated to Azure, coming up with a conceptual architecture. All of these are actually done as part of the SS framework. And at the end of the SS framework, we also provide a total cost of ownership assessment to the customers and what value propositions are going to be achieved by the customer by migrating the SAP systems to Azure platform. All that is typically done as part of SS phase. And while that is the phase in itself, we have actually found ways in which we can do that in a repetitive manner, in a automated manner, and for any given customer in a templatized manner. All those have been inbuilt into the framework in itself. That is Ascent all about. And once we assess and understand the customer's landscapes, we actually do some kind of POCs. In fact, I mean, customer also needs to feel how the systems are going to run in the platform like Azure. So we typically recommend a POC, and what kind of recommendations, what kind of systems are expected to be performed or rather considered for that POC. We also would propose that and plan it out well and arrive at a business case as to why what that very specific system was chosen for the POC. All that is explained, and we mobilize that, or rather we actually kind of move that system to Azure as a POC and provide all the the peripheral information about how the POC is performed, what it means. I mean, and I'm sure some of you have heard of well-architected systems, well-architected platforms, and so on. When we migrate the systems, and at the time of POC itself, we actually provide a glimpse of how well-architected systems can be, hosted in Azure environment. All that is actually shown as part of the POC. Get some confidence inside the customer, IT teams and business teams, make them understand what all various peripheral components reside inside the Azure platform. All that is actually done. And once customers and prospects are actually are comfortable with the ways in which the systems are migrated, that's when the actual entire SAP landscape is considered for migration. So that's when the migration and modernize phase comes into play. While all of these phases are typically common, the way in which we have been doing these based on the experiences, all of these steps have been templatized. So more or less, any customer's landscape with minor differences, the steps that we need to take in terms of assessing, mobilizing, migrating, and eventually reaching the operation stage, all of these are templatized, and we were able to actually fast track many of these customers' migration journeys. So in the modernize and migrate and modernize, which is the core topic of our today's webinar also, where Vikram is going to provide additional details, that is where we would actually see what all various ways in which we have been able to make systems move faster, how one-step migrations can be performed, even if there are some additional steps to be considered, like upgrades are involved, like Unicode conversions are involved, like an S4 HANA conversions are involved, even if you are an ECC. But all of these, how can all of these be combined and be done in one or two steps without even wasting time, without even actually spending a lot of time and energy? How do we do that? All that is actually kind of templatized as part of our Ascent framework, and that is where all these experiences are actually baked into that. And then eventually the operate and optimize stage comes into play, where not only we start feeling the performance improvements that we would have received based on the uh, Azure platforms services, but once the systems are available in Azure, what all various additional activities that can be performed, what is the true power of Azure, what all additional services that are offered by Azure can be truly used to unlock the potential of the SAP systems. How can we do the data analysis using Azure services? How can we, even, for example, I mean, if you have seen, typically many of the SAP systems are monitored through various different means, like maybe using the same system, like maybe using a solution manager system, like maybe using a third-party systems, and so on. But Azure has its own service. Even without even logging into the SAP systems, we should be able to use the native services that are offered alongside the platform in itself using such capabilities. How do we do that? How do we actually use a Power BI platform or a Power platform to to draw some dashboards out of the SAP system using SAP data, and how can we actually combine the power of both SAP as the backbone system and Microsoft as the window for either accessing or drawing some data out into the Power platform and visualize all that, how powerfully you can actually use all that. That is where the operational excellences and the improvement phases comes into play during the operate and optimize phase. All of these were done, all of these were templatized, and that is YASH Ascent is all about. And you would see some of those glimpses of the migrate and modernize phases and what all typical activities are involved in the upcoming slides. That's a, I know it's a long recap, but I mean, there is a lot of information around. So I leave it to Vikram to take over.
Yeah, yeah. Thank
Thanks.
you, Sridhar,
And
and
before you get
thank you,
started, Vikram,
Jeff.
I just want to make one thing I neglected to mention at the beginning. Folks, we do welcome your questions. If you look at the top of your Teams screen, you're not familiar with Teams, just to the very top and to the just right of center, there's a little bubble that says chat underneath it. And I'm going to go ahead and put my email address in there. So if you have questions, we ask that you type them into the chat window that's down there, and you can just do that by clicking on it. So make sure that and if you're interested in learning more about the free workshop, please put your information in there as well. Sorry about that. Just I neglected to mention that at the beginning, and I wanted to do that. Vikram, over to you.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Sridhar, for briefing the Ascent framework, and that was very important for the audience who are joining for the first time to get the recap and understand the actual webinar here. Uh, so I believe everyone can see the screen. We're going to talk about the migration approach as the third phase. I mean, there are uh, four phases as part of the asset framework where we covered the assess phase, then mobilize phase, where the POCs are done, and then we move on to the migration and modernization phase. Okay, so there are multiple approaches we can adopt for the migration. It depends upon the customer environment, how critical the customer environment is, how it is architected, how difficult the SAP systems are there, how to move them. To understand their environment, we do the assess phase and POC phase, and then we move on to the migration phase. So if you can see the screen here, it is divided into four quadrants here. Okay, on the left side you can see the homogeneous migration, and on the right side you can see the heterogeneous migration. Let's cover the left side of the quadrants and walk through the actual migration approach here. If you can see the first quadrant here, which talks about homogeneous migration of any DB. When I say any DB here, any customer could be on any other traditional databases like Oracle or MS SQL. How can we migrate? It's a typical way where we can migrate using the SAP own tools, the backup restore, where the target environment will be built with the similar or the same database, and we can use the backup restore method, and also the classical migration where the R3 load is used to migrate the services. Okay, there is a interesting point here. How the Azure helps here. What kind of Azure services can be leveraged? You can see there's a Azure Site Recovery option, which directly moves the source system from the block level to the target. So there are a lot of provisioning, a lot of services provided by Azure here, where we can analyze, for example, if the customer source systems are on VMs, so they can use the Azure services to do the block level replication from source to target. So that is from any DB to any DB or same DB for that matter. Coming to the second quadrant, which talks about homogeneous migration for SAP HANA. Okay, how can if customer is already on SAP HANA on the source system, what are the possible options for us to move to the target here in the Azure cloud? The similar kind of steps can be considered for where we can leverage the SAP tools, which is a backup restore method. And there is another SAP tool which is we can leverage is the HANA system replication. This is HANA database replication. How, what kind of advantage we would get using the HSR method? Okay, by using this method, we can have a close to zero downtime. I would not say zero downtime. Downtime can be minimized here, where the business doesn't have to go for a bigger downtime. So HSR can be replicated on parallel basis, and during the cutover activity with the minimum downtime, we can have the systems up and running on the target. Similarly, Azure Site Recovery is also can be leveraged using the Azure services, where we can replicate from the block level. But there are certain restrictions from the Azure Site Recovery. There are known issues which has to be addressed if you are using, because HANA is an in-memory database. Replicating is sometimes can corrupt the database, but still that can be addressed. I mean, they have been addressed. We have experience in that addressing as well. But more or less, these are the tools which can be leveraged for us to move HANA database from source to target. Let's move to the second quadrant here. We are talking about the third one. Option is the heterogeneous migration, any DB to any DB. So basically, this is a classical migration where any DB can be, for example, if you are moving from MS SQL to Oracle, there is a you can leverage the SAP tool, which is a SWPM, where you can migrate your services, your SAP system from source to target. Coming down, the fourth quadrant, this another heterogeneous migration. We are talking about any DB to SAP HANA here. Okay, here we are basically talking about this is a very important topic which we're going to discuss going further. Any DB to SAP HANA here, any the source system where they could be on Oracle or MS SQL where they want to move on to HANA. So if you can see there are classical migration where we can leverage the SAP tool by using SWPM, which we spoke about from the third option. Here comes a tip. The some DMO, which is a tool SAP provides where it can be leveraged to move the source system into the target Azure environment by upgrading or migrating with a one-step migration. We're going to speak about that in the next slide. So this can be leveraged with a system move option where a lot of things can be addressed in one step, where you can upgrade, where you can do a Unicode conversion, or you can do a OSDB database change also, or the OS change as well. So this is overall migration approach where we're going to leverage multiple SAP and Azure services to move from source to target. Okay. Yeah. So basically, these are the tools, as I was explaining, through multiple quadrants, how we leverage the SAP tools and the HANA tools, and as well as the Azure services to migrate. Yeah. Coming to this slide, this is Microsoft certified approach where Microsoft also advised to take this approach. Every customer environment is different. Every customer source systems are architected in a way could be more complicated, where that has to be addressed in order to move them to the Azure environment. As you can see, there are two strategies, a vertical and horizontal strategies. Depending upon customers' environment, their business requirements, these strategies can be applicable. Uh, I would not say this can be applicable for every customer, but depending upon the assessment phase and the mobilize phase, how the POC are done with the discovery sessions, understand the customer environment, the difficulties, we would come up with an option where which is rightly adaptable for that customer, whether it's a vertical strategy or horizontal strategy. So what are the risk and what are the advantages which customer would gain here? When I say vertical strategy, it's a top bottom where typical best practice where every customer would adopt to move their systems. Well, like they would address the sandbox, dev, quality, and prod. That's a typical approach where they would understand, resolve, get to know the issues and understand the resolutions. Depending upon customers' environment, if they have to move their production, which is a business critical, there is a vertical approach or horizontal approach also can be taken care, will be taken up depending upon our discussions with the customer. So, Sridhar, do you want to add any points here?
Yeah. A couple of points. See, one of the reasons that we also discussed during our last webinar is also why Azure is the right platform for moving SAP systems, right? I mean, I was using this term, this phrase, if I remember correctly, that Azure or Microsoft has its own skin in the game. Probably this is what I used as a phrase. What it means is Microsoft runs on SAP. Microsoft's own business runs on SAP systems like SAP S/4HANA, SAP ECC, SAP BW, SAP CRMs of the world. They use their day-to-day business operations run on SAP. Probably the other platforms don't run their businesses on SAP. So that actually shows how much of skin that Microsoft has in the overall game of SAP in the first place. So Microsoft in itself, not only on one side runs its own business on SAP, and those SAP systems are actually running on Azure platform. So you look at the combination. I mean, we are talking about SAP on Azure here. Now, Microsoft is running its own SAP systems on its own platform in Azure. So basically, what I mean to say is, Microsoft also used it to run all these SAP systems on-prem earlier. Okay, and no better example is available than Microsoft itself trying to run its own production systems on a platform that it is actually asking customers to move their systems to, which is Azure. So if Microsoft itself can run their on-prem systems in Azure and how they migrated their systems to Azure, what better examples can we actually take from who other than Microsoft itself, right? In that context, these are the typical cloud migration strategies that were prescribed by Microsoft in itself, which Vikram was actually trying to explain. In fact, Microsoft is explaining these and recommending these cloud migration strategies not by, not theoretically. Actually, they have performed this internally. They have moved their own systems by using these strategies. A vertical strategy, which is a very, very typical strategy. What vertical strategy means? In one component, move all the ECC systems one after the other. Start with a sandbox and then followed by dev, quality, and production. That is the vertical strategy. If you see ECC there, or a CRM, or a BW, whatever the case may be. So one after the other. I mean, that is a typical strategy that many of the customers also follow. There is another horizontal strategy where we actually move all the sandboxes of all the components, be it ECC, CRM, or BW, or S4, or whatever, move all those sandboxes at once during the first phase, and then followed by all the development systems of all of these systems, and then quality, and then production of all of these systems. That is another strategy. Now, which strategy is right for which customer? As partners, we would be able to determine during our discovery, mobilize phases, and eventually be able to recommend that. But these are various migration strategies that could be followed. That is what Vikram trying to convey, and that is what I wanted to add.
Thank you, Sridhar.
Vikram.
Yeah. So yeah, we were talking about the migration approaches where I was talking about the 4 quadrants, and the fourth quadrant was the important quadrant, which was emphasizing on the one-step migration using some DMO, the heterogeneous copy. As you can see on the left side, there is an NEDB, and on the right side, we're talking about HANA database. So what is the significance of one-step migration? What is that customer is going to gain out of this? Okay, any customer who are on their OSDB, which could be on older versions or different OSDBs, and also their application might not be upgraded for a long time, which they are looking to upgrade, and their application is on not Unicode, which has to be Unicode conversion. So there are multiple options or multiple things can be addressed in one step. Any customer would want to move as well as they can do the migration to the cloud as well. So this is a very, very very well understood and thought through process, which can address a lot of concerns in one step. As I was mentioning, if you can see upgrade Unicode conversion, and as part of this, we can also address a S/4HANA conversion through one step. So this is a some DMO move option where you can upgrade your OSDP, you can upgrade your database, you can upgrade your application while Unicode conversion, and you can go on to the S/4HANA conversion as well. Sridhar, you want to add something related to S/4HANA which can be accomplished as part of one-step migration, where we can where we can address the application level concerns from related to S/4HANA?
Absolutely. I mean, just to add, I mean, many of the customers are on ECC, and many of the customers are moving to S4. obviously ECC to S4 is a product change also. It's not a standard upgrade. It's not a it's like ECC EHP1 to EHP5 upgrade, or 5 to 6, or 5 to 6 to 7. It's not just that, it's beyond that. ECC is a different product which has different underlying structures, different configurations, and the different business processes, the way it was configured. And S4 is a, of course, I mean, a modern ERP, and with modern technologies involved and whatnot, I mean, including theories of the world. Now, many of the customers are expected to change their ECC or upgrade their ECC to S4. Now, I mean, this one-step migration is one thing. I mean, we have been actually kind of performing. This is not it's not invented by YASH per se. It is an SAP standard way, but there are definitely quite a lot of concerns, quite a lot of aspects that are involved while moving on. As is, we are actually trying to move a system from on-prem to cloud. That in itself is a project on its own. However, in the interest of time, in the interest of the money, in the interest of various steps, if those can be combined together to be moved to cloud, if that can also be done together, we would be saving quite a lot of time. And that requires some amount of involvement, some amount of understanding of what all the various things that could actually go wrong, some kind of lessons learned. All of these are there in our repository based on the projects that we have already performed. So we have been actually advocating customers to be able to leverage that experiences that we have had, and try moving all of their steps, combine all of their steps together into one step. And it could be a ECC to another ECC, but I mean, it was a non-Unicode to Unicode. Probably it's most of the customers are already Unicode nowadays. It's that can also be considered. And even an upgrade can be combined into that steps. Even a migration of a legacy database to a HANA database can be considered. All of them can be done. Or even an S4 conversion can also be performed. And S4 conversion in itself requires a little more, functional teams involvement, and, various different functions like finance, manufacturing, and so on. All of these need to be involved because there are underlying structural changes that are happening. However, I mean, from in this context of one-step migration, all of those requirements can be together met, and you can actually probably save the project duration. I mean, rather time, and with a curtailed project duration, but still getting a modern ERP in the context. So that is what, I mean, he was trying to explain. And so definitely all of these can be taken up together.
Thank you, Sridhar. Yeah, coming to the architecture pattern. Okay, we have seen we have understood the how the different ways to migrate the system depending upon the customer environment, and we also went through the one-step migration where a lot of things can be achieved in one step, like upgrade and platform change and upgrade of ECC system and S/4HANA. So this all can be possible until unless we don't find how the target architecture seems to be. Okay, once we do the assess phase and all the POCs also, we try to come up with the architecture pattern and what is suitable. We will go through the vigorous exercise of doing the sizing, identifying the region where the customer would want to be hosted, their primary region, their secondary region, how the systems need to be architected, whether it has to be a distributed environment or a single central system environment. How can we leverage the availability sets and availability zones? Once we talk about Azure, the availability sets come into picture. Like when we talk about availability sets within the same data center, if you want to have your HA to be configured, the available set would be a suitable option for in order to provision for them. And also we can also leverage the availability zones. When we talk about the availability zone within that region, there could be a multiple data centers which can be distributed as the availability zone. As you see this architecture pattern, this can be adopted for customer depending upon the complexity and how they want to have this architecture. It can be similar to their source environment, or it can be re-architected in a better way so that they can have a better performance better agility, and also they can have a cost optimized options where they can leverage to have this architecture design. So this is a typical architecture where we're talking about a basic architecture for the standalone system and the high availability and the discovery. Disaster recovery, basically. For disaster recovery, we can have a multiple options. Again, we're going to speak about that in the business continuity, where we're going to address what kind of different options we can have for the DR to reduce the RTO and RPO depending upon the cost levels from low to high. So this is a typical architecture pattern how it can be adopted for customer depending upon the requirements. Yeah. Okay. This is a very important topic. Where customer wants to have their business continuity. Any customer would want, depending upon the business, the complexity, they would want to adopt the business continuity plan. This is the HADR options where we're going to talk about the different options the customer can leverage, where they can have their RTO and RPO addressed depending upon the business. Okay, as you can see from the left to right, we're going to talk about the low cost to high cost. It all depends. Again, I'm trying to reiterate all this word again and again. It's all depends upon the customer's environment, their requirement, how they want to go for the business continuity plan. As you can see on the left side, the backup and restore method. This is a typical database backup restore method, which basically they can take a backup and store it in the Azure blob or any storage location. So this is a low cost where just the backups are taken. This is a RTO. This is a point in time recovery from the last backup when they have taken. That would be the RPO. That could be a 12 hours. The cycle of backups whenever it was taken the last backup. So this is a low cost, but again the RPO and RTO going to go up, which will be in hours. Okay, when the second option is the pilot light. Here, RT and RP is ours. Basically, we can leverage the Azure services and also the backup, the point in time where we can have the backups done. The constant backups can be taken care with the archives and also the Azure. We can leverage the Azure site recovery also where the data can be moved from one region to another region. Where here the RPO and RPO also looks in hours because again this is little bit better than the backup and restore method. Okay, coming to the third option, we're going to talk about the warm standby here in Azure. Here, the cost is little bit moderate, I would say, where we have the two databases on when we're talking about multi-site. So you have a HANA database or any other database on the one region, and your DR is another region where your database is replicated, but the application is not up and running. So this is a cost optimized as well, where your database is in sync, where the RPO will be less, but again RTO will be going up depending upon the post activities what you're going to perform if there is any DR scenario. Hot standby. Yes, this is a high cost, I would say, because we're going to have the similar databases, sizing, provisioning at primary and the secondary site, where you have everything up and running. The database will be down, but you have the same kind of resources allocated for both primary and secondary, where the database is in sync. There could be some 15 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 to 15 minutes of latency where you will be just losing RP of 10 to 15 minutes. Again, we're mentioning as 30 minutes here, but again, what kind of parameters we are setting for the sync to have the minimum RPO. But 30 minutes what we are quoting it, but it can be less than that. Again, this is a high cost where your systems can be up and running within no time. If there is HA, for example, we are talking about DR, but if it is a HA where you're having a hot standby, your HA is on real time because the continuous replication is happening from your primary node 1 to node 2. So this is about the business continuity plan, where you can leverage the Azure services to accomplish it. So this is a typical HADR architecture where as I was explaining about the multiple options which can be leveraged the hot standby is what we have explained here. As you can see, the node 1 and node 2, where we, as I was mentioning, the availability sets can be leveraged for node 1 and node 2 to accomplish the HA, where both these sets are within the same data center, where we have an immediate switchover from node 1 to node 2 that can be adapted here. And as you see, the node 1 and node 2, which are part of availability sets, which are in US South Central, and the availability zone for the DR is provisioned in the US Central. Okay, and if you can see the HANA sync, async is happening between node 2 and node 2 and the DR site, and the application is replicated to Azure Site Recovery. Of course, there will be a certain RPO incurred in this DR scenario, but RTO is going to little bit be more than RPO, so that we have to bring back the systems. So this is a typical HADR architecture which can be adopted. There is another HADR architecture also which we're going to talk. We're going to have a cost optimized depending upon customers' requirement, and they don't want to shell out so much of money to go for hot standby. There can be other options which can be discussed depending upon the customer's requirement. Definitely, there is a cost optimized approach as well. Okay. Yes. One second. Okay. Yeah. As we've been talking through all the 4 different modules of the Ascent framework, where we covered the assess phase, where we covered the mobilize phase, where we have covered the migration and modernization phase, and now comes the monitoring and stabilized phase. So after achieving all these aspects, what is the next from the monitoring? As you can see here, the Azure monitoring for SAP solutions. So this monitoring for SAP solution uses the power of existing Azure monitoring capabilities, which contains, as you can see, which contains the log analyticals, collect VMs, keywords, storage queues. So these are the AMS services. Basically, when you say AMS, it's talk about the monitoring and SAP solution for provided by Azure. Okay, so what kind of analytical analysis it's going to do? As Sridhar was earlier also mentioning, this is the Azure services where without even you going into the systems, these services can be leveraged from the application level till the database level till the infrastructure level. Everything can be analyzed with the workbooks, providing more monitoring capabilities. It reads the SAP data available in the log analytics and makes data available for the workbooks to show in the graphical manner. So Azure Monitoring for SAP solution is a Azure native monitoring product for customers running their SAP landscapes. With Azure monitoring, SAP solution can collect all the telemetrics data, and that can be visually available. As you can see, the data is collected from the application database and OS level, and through the Azure monitoring that can be sent across the alerts. If there are any alerts which has to be sent across, that can be sent across with email or SMS. So, Sridhar, do you want to add something related to the monitoring services?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, you actually covered many of the points with respect to MS, Azure monitoring service. I mean, typically SAP systems are monitored from within the application layer of SAP. Typically, I mean, and be it from within that system or be it using another SAP system, which is a solution manager, a focused run, and so on. Focus on could be with SAP, could be with the customer, and so on, depending on the licensing. But I mean, the Azure, I mean, because the systems are obviously hosted in a platform like Azure, and the systems are anyway monitored at the hardware level by the Microsoft provided services. We can definitely leverage those. But I mean, at the application layer level of SAP, IDOC is failed. Let's say some of the bad jobs are failed. I mean, some messages are failed in a interfacing scenario. All of these are being actually developed as part of the AMS solution by Azure. That AMS is one-stop shop for monitoring even the application layer level parameters as well. Uh, because I mean, typically many of the third-party systems do not understand the underlying SAP's architecture, and they would not be able to really monitor AI doc failure, A batch job failure, and so on. But I mean, SAP is also opening up. SAP opened up its own systems, opening up APIs to these kind of solutions like AMS and so on. And AMS as a service, I mean, our Azure Monitor service is actually leveraging those APIs to monitor the underlying SAP application layer parameters as well. And while currently, and probably, I mean, only few parameters are being monitored by AMS, and that is continuously enhanced by Microsoft. And more and more number of parameters are being, monitored by Azure Monitor, and that too at the SAP application layer level. I'm not really talking much about, I mean, if you have noticed, I'm not talking much about OS, DB, cluster at the hardware level and so on. They are typically done. They are typically taken care by the hardware provider, which is in itself, Microsoft Azure. However, I mean, at the SAP application core layer level, all of those, if not all, at least, I mean, Microsoft Azure Monitor as a solution is actually kind of enhanced day by day, and that is being used to, analyze or rather monitor the SAP application parameters, analyze those, provide some dashboards. All of these are actually being built. So you can at least technically use AMS to monitor even the SAP systems, be that an SAP S/4HANA system, be that a SAP World ECC kind of a system, or any other component for that matter. That is being enhanced. That is what we wanted to convey. Over to you, Vikram.
Yeah. I think this is pretty much about Azure monitoring. And as I was explaining, there are multiple options. Can you go back, Jeff? I just don't want to take much time. I think we are running out of time, and I want to address the questions here. Yeah, so there are a lot of managed resources here where we collect the keyword basically, where all the certificates and all the keys can be tightly stored without any uh, kind of where it is more secure. I would like to say that. So these are multiple services, as Sridhar was explaining, which can be leveraged from Azure services. Yeah.
We will go ahead and conclude this webinar. I want to thank everybody for their time. We have recorded the webinar, so if you would like a copy of the recording or a link to the recording sent to you, we can absolutely do that. Just please, I saw one person already asked for that, and we can send that out to anybody that requests it. If you want one, please email me. I put my email address in the chat. I'll put it in there again one more time so you don't have to scroll. And if you are interested in receiving a recording of this webinar, or if you are interested in participating in one of our free workshops that we described at the beginning of this, to get into this and this migration and planning in a little bit more detail with our subject matter experts, like the folks you met today and presented to you today, please let us know that. And again, thank you very much for your time. And please look, we will be continuing these webinar series and continuing to try to educate our customer base on the options that are available to you for SAP in the cloud. And thank you very much. And we will be in touch. And thank everybody for their time.